Quick reaction video to the news that Darrell Taylor has been traded to the Bears for a sixth rounder next year. But I've no issue with the move. I've seen some people suggest that it leaves the Seahawks a little bit thin at defensive end. I don't agree with that. I think they've got enough in terms of the rotation there. They've got some younger players as well. I don't think it's a major issue losing Darrell Taylor. Increasingly, as camp and preseason has gone along, it felt as if a little bit like with Michael Jackson, that he wasn't going to be making it in Seattle. And they've moved him on for a throwaway six-round pick rather than just losing him for nothing and cutting him outright. Darrell Taylor is a tease. He's one of those players who is just a real tease that you look at him. I've stood next to Darrell Taylor. He's walked past me in Germany. And when you look at him, you can't help but be impressed with his physical stature, with he looks the part. He looks like an elite pass rushing defensive end should look like in the NFL. And when he gets a sack and he can bend the edge and he can use his length and he's got great balance and he's got good get off, that's why he's got, 20 sacks or something in his career. When he gets a sack and he does those things, you can convince yourself that there's a player in there. But the reality is with Darrell Taylor is he has never been able to take himself to become a complete defensive end, because being an edge rusher is about more than just the occasional splash play, the occasional sack, creating a pressure. If you are going to be in there as anything more than a rotational defensive end pass rusher, you have got to defend the run. You have got to be able to put your helmet in there and make a stop or set an edge. You do have to do the little things well. You have a role and a job to do, which is beyond just sort of pinning your ears back and rushing to the quarterback. And all of the players who work in this system or any other can't just rely on being a third down specialist who gets after the quarterback. And quite frankly, if it was third down in a big game for the Seahawks, I wouldn't choose to have Darrell Taylor out there over Uchenna and Wosu, Boya Mafe, perhaps even Derek Hall, the way that he's playing. So I think he's one of those players who will always flirt with being really good and never actually get there. Now, he could go to the Bears, and don't deny that he may have 7 or 8 sacks if he sticks. He might be able to create some production there, and people in a few weeks' time might go, well, why did they get rid of him for a 6th-round pick? I guarantee if you actually were to watch those games, though, that you would see more good than bad. More bad than good. You would see, him struggling against the run. You would see him kind of just freelancing a little bit. You would see him kind of just drifting in and out. To me, he always felt like a player whose concentration would drift during a game. And there's no better example of that than that late hit he had against Jared Goff, where the play's kind of called to an end and he goes flying and hits him well after the, you'd be hard pushed to find a later hit than that. He's not focusing. And that to me is what he is. And you can't rely on players like that. He was never going to push on and become a complete defender. And I also think he's the kind of player who could easily end up getting 6 to 8 sacks somewhere, and then the team who had him just thinking, we'll move on, thanks, you can go and play somewhere else. And he might bounce around the league for 2 or 3 years and still be someone who can get you 5, 6, 7, 8 sacks, but never sticks because he is not a complete defender. So I think just sort of moving on, as I've done with Michael Jackson, getting something for the player, I think it's a reasonable thing to do. If he goes and has a great time in Chicago, I will not point a finger of blame at the Seahawks. I don't think they necessarily need him for depth. Like I said, by all accounts, they seem to have good depth. They do seem to have some young players that they like. And they gave Darrell Taylor every opportunity to make it work. There's been a few players. Eskridge is another one. The fact that they were open to bringing back Jamal Adams, the fact they brought back Marquise Blair. It seems to me that John Schneider has looked at some of Seattle's draft picks who have not worked out in recent years and is maybe even thinking, that old regime, the Carroll regime, didn't get the most out of these guys, and they deserve another chance with the new regime. And I think that's what's happening here. And Mike Macdonald and his staff have now had an opportunity to look at and assess Darrell Taylor, and they've decided not for me. So that's another thing there. It's not as if Seattle's just moved on glibly without sort of letting Macdonald have a look here. This will have been a move inspired by Macdonald and his coaches, that they've just said to John Schneider, and they've commuted to John Schneider, we can't win with this guy. He's not part of our plans. We're going to move on. And they have done. So they save some money in terms of cap space. They get a 6th rounder back they were minus a 5th rounder next year because of the Leonard Williams trade, I think. So they get a 6th rounder back. They move on from Darrell Taylor. They've got cap space. They've got about 10 million to play with now. Some of that obviously is tied down for the things that happen during a season, but it also means that the Seahawks, if they want to make other moves, they can do. If it gets towards the trade deadline and they want to make a deal, they'll have the flexibility to potentially do that. They may want to make some more moves in the coming week when the cut downs are starting to happen now because teams have finished their preseason schedule. Seattle's will finish this weekend, of course, on Saturday against the Browns, and they might want to make some moves here and there. And we'll see what happens. But again, I think it's a good move. I think it was a good move with Michael Jackson. I think this is a good move. I think things are all coming together for the Seahawks. I didn't really expect much from Darrell Taylor based on what we've seen so far. I think the noises after Tennessee and the fact that they gave him as much playing time as they did in that game made me think that this is a guy they've had a good look at, and now they've just decided, no, he's going to move on. And I'm convinced that he will go on to be a tease, that he will have some good moments for Chicago, but they won't see him as like a big part of the plans, that he'll never be able to become that complete player. He will always be a player who just flashes every now and again. And I'm not going to be crying over any spilt milk with the fact that he's now gone to play in the NFC North rather than playing for the Seahawks moving forward. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the Darrell Taylor trade. What do you think about it? Let me know in the comment section. Make sure you like the video. For more analysis, SeahawksDraftBlog.com.